In Re AC, The Case of Angela Carter, podcast by Alexa Rednick. Angela Carter was a woman who was 27 years old, and she had battled cancer her whole life. And once she was 3 years into remission, she decided to get married and have a child. Once she was pregnant, they referred her to George Washington University Medical Center as a high-risk pregnancy because of the history of cancer. When she was 25 weeks pregnant, they found that she had a tumor in her lung. Carter had made it very clear to her doctors from the very start that she did not want the pregnancy to hurt her own health. So when at all possible, she wanted her health to come before the fetus's. She then began to deteriorate, and the liability risk manager and administration of the hospital decided to step in and said they had to deliver the fetus. This was against Carter's views and against the family and the doctors because they all wanted to agree with Carter, so they took it to trial. So at the trial, a neonatologist in the courtroom stated that the fetus would have around 60% chance of living, but he stated that as a regular pregnant woman at 25 weeks, not looking into the health risks of Angela Carter, who has cancer. They went in to do the C-section, and the doctor started to tell her about the risks, and Carter said no. So they went back to the court, and the court said you have to do the C-section. They did the C-section, and Carter died 2 days later, and the fetus died within 2 hours. Carter never received the oncological treatments, and the fetus died. The first viewpoint is that they decide to treat the cancer, but if they treat the cancer, Carter would be happy, but the fetus would most likely die. The second viewpoint is to wait and let the cancer take over, and because we don't know at this point what cancer does to the body, Carter most likely will die, and the baby will most likely also die. The third viewpoint, that we do the C-section, where, as we know, the baby dies, and Carter will also die. For the first theory is Kantianism, where Kantianism is you must follow what is morally right in all situations with no exceptions. So looking at the first formulation, Kant's theory, you must act completely lawful and purely rational and moral maxim. And the court was completely unlawful in forcing a cesarean section. They wouldn't do that on anybody else, and the fact that they did it on her was completely unright, especially because she refused to give her informed consent. And the second they didn't abide by was the moral maxim, because the fetus has precedence over the mother, which makes no sense because the fetus would not be real if the mother was not there. Going from the second formulation of Kant that states we must never treat a person as a mere means, they basically used Carter as a means for the fetus, where Carter, the only reason they used her was to give birth of the fetus. So when bringing all the evidence together, they're strong that Kant's categorical imperative proves the court was wrong to perform the C-section. With utilitarianism, you have to look at what brings the greatest happiness to everyone, and because happiness is equally important, and to maximize the intrinsic good and absence of pain to everybody. So looking at our three viewpoints, the first viewpoint of her getting oncological treatment, she would be happy, her husband would be happy, and her parents would also be happy because Carter would most likely live, and that is what she wanted, so all three of them would be happy. With the second one, with Carter dying and the fetus dying because they would wait and not pursue anything until the child's old enough, the only person that would probably be happy are researchers, because they would be able to see what happens when a fetus is exposed to cancer. And the third option is do the C-section, and the only people that would be happy would be the administration, because they got what they wanted, and that was to get the fetus out. So looking at all three options, having researchers happy and having administration happy does not coincide with the fact of Carter, her husband, and her parents would all be happy, which brings utilitarianism to viewpoint number 1 as the best option. Now looking at the principle of biomedical ethics, there are 4 parts to it, so non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and autonomy, and so we'll take one at a time. So with non-maleficence, it is basically meaning do no harm, intentional or intentional. So when looking at non-maleficence, the first viewpoint of doing oncological treatments, the fetus would be harmed. When you look at the second viewpoint of waiting and seeing what the cancer does, Carter would be harmed because she most likely would die. The fetus would most likely die, and the family would be upset because Carter passed and did not get what she wanted. The third option of doing the C-section is the same thing, where Carter would be unhappy because she died. The fetus would be unhappy because she died, and the family would emotionally be harmed because obviously when you die, that is considered harm. So looking at the 3 options, number 1, the viewpoint of doing oncological treatment is the best because there is only 1 person being harmed compared to 3 in the other situations. Beneficence is the point of where you are removing the harm and you're promoting the welfare of others. So in this case, doing oncological treatment, Carter would be removed from harm, which is the cancer, and the family and the doctors would benefit because of Carter not getting harmed from cancer, and they also would emotionally be better off without her being harmed. The only people that would benefit from option 2 of waiting until the fetus is old enough is the researchers, because they benefit from the research they would gain from watching Carter and the fetus. And the third option is administration. The administration would benefit because that would mean that they were right in a sense, and they would have got the upper hand and won the court case. So looking at the 3 options, where it's 1 against 3, and Carter is one of the main people in the top case that would benefit, number 1 is the best option. The biomedical ethics of justice have some very interesting effects to the case. So when you look at justice of equality, Carter and fetus are technically equals if we are going by the definition of justice of equality. So then you're looking at option number 2 of the waiting game to try and get Carter and the fetus both to live, but ultimately that most likely is not the case. The option of need is, I think, one of the most important of this theory, because without Carter, the fetus would not be a thing. The fetus would not be born, so therefore the fetus needs Carter. And ultimately, the fetus wouldn't even be in the situation without Carter. Contribution is interesting because when you look at both Carter and the fetus would contribute more to society if it did join this earth and not have any issues or disabilities from its life in intrauterine. So the fetus would contribute more, as Carter has a lot of oncological issues and takes up a lot of time and effort from hospitals and doctors and healthcare professionals. And the fetus has not contributed anything to society, so the fetus has not made any effort in anything, whereas Carter even though she has had cancer, she has worked a job and has tried to contribute to society as a whole. So looking at it, I think need is the most important, which states Carter is more important than the fetus, give say. And then also you see Carter in two other options. So in this case, Carter is almost more deserving to be alive compared to the fetus. Autonomy is a very relevant piece of biomedical ethics because in reality, Carter's autonomy is what really matters. So if you were to look at what Carter wants, which is oncological and treatment, which would include chemotherapy and radiation, she would go with that because she said, I want my health to come before the fetus. So for autonomy, Carter would be happy with oncological treatment, and the fetus would obviously not live, but in Carter's mind, there is the option to possibly have another child in the future. So although this fetus may not live, there's a possibility for a fetus in the future. In conclusion, when looking at everything, a few years after the fetus and Carter died, there was another trial in the DC Court of Appeals of NBank INRI AC, and it basically vacated the court order of the cesarean section held from Carter had the right to make healthcare decisions for herself and the fetus, basically stating the court admitted to being wrong. When you look at ethical reasons, what they did was completely unethical, and what they should have done is they should have allowed Carter to go through with the oncological treatments, and the fetus may have died, but that's okay because when looking at all ethical theories, Carter is above the fetus when it comes to autonomy and everything in life. Carter should be the one that gets to make her own choice over the court because she is the one that is carrying the child and she deserves that. All references can be found in the research paper provided with the podcast. Thank you.